Hi, everybody. This is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Mo Issa, entrepreneur, speaker, and author. He's written 3 books exploring personal transformation, the journey to authenticity, and the quest for deeper meaning in life. I'm super excited because I really believe we're entering the age of authenticity right now, and a lot of us are searching for a deeper meaning in our lives. So, with that, welcome, Mo, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you. I have a lot of stuff that I want to ask you about, but
Okay.
let's start off with your background. Can you give us an idea? Obviously, we're going to get up to what you're doing now, but how did you get to start in your career, and what led you to where you are now?
Okay. So I'm a bit of a mixed bag. Maybe I have credentials to be a spy. I mean, with all my background, I mean, I'm originally from Lebanon, Lebanese. My parents are Lebanese, but we've lived in Ghana, West Africa, most of our lives. I've also lived in England for about 12 years as well. So I've got all these three blends in me. I've studied, my formative years were spent in the UK, studied there, and lived most of my lives there, most of my young life there. And I went back, I came back to Ghana where I live now, and I've set up my company, which I've been running for 30 years now, 30 years. And it's throughout this journey I've sort of evolved and changed here, and I've taken up a few things, specifically personal transformation and journaling, and specifically writing has been at the heart of my transformation journey.
So as an entrepreneur, what I guess what was your initial sort of impulse to want to be an entrepreneur and have your own business?
I mean, I've been brought up on that. My father is an entrepreneur. Lebanese traditionally they have entrepreneurship blood in them. They've immigrated all over the world because their country was never stable enough, always wars and revolutions and so on. So we're used to this immigrating to other countries, and you have like certain communities who talk about being doctors or lawyers. With Lebanese, it's predominantly entrepreneurship, business, and making money. That's the bottom line, really.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. Obviously, from a security standpoint, if you're unsure what the economy is going to be like, you're not even sure about the safety of being where you are. That makes total sense. So you built up this successful business, and then when you were 40, you had a career and a life that most people would consider super successful and something that they dream of, but you, for some reason, didn't feel fulfilled. Can you share with us what that experience was like?
Absolutely. I mean, that goes at the heart of my life journey because well, I started sort of questioning my. I wasn't very happy. I was questioning my life. Like, okay, I've got all this money. I'm spending lavishly, and I'm enjoying. And the whole thing was sort of amplified by two events that happened to me together simultaneously. One of them was a near death of my nephew, and it coincided with my business sort of taking a hit. I'd overextended with the banks. I moved to another country in Africa, and sort of the gun was loaded on my head. Like I had to pay up a big loan, or I would the company would fold. So these two things came together and sort of amplified my thinking. Like, yes, it's wonderful to have money. It's to tick all the boxes of security, the home, the shelter. But after a certain amount, after a certain way of spending, like I started sort of reflecting, and I found that I was sort of, the more money I made, the more I was spending, and it wasn't exponentially equal to the more happiness I was getting, you know. So that was the key to my sort of to start my journey and to start questioning a lot of my motives and my aspirations, honestly.
Yeah, that's fascinating, but I've actually seen studies about that as well. There's a certain amount of money that we need in order to feel comfortable, take care of all of our basic needs, all the stuff that we would want. Once you get past that certain point, there's very low correlation with additional happiness because there's only so many things that you can buy, right? But the funny thing is, if you talk to anybody who's in a position of want, who doesn't have, they say, well, that's crazy. The more money that I had, the happier I'd be. And I think it isn't until you get into that situation where you start to realize that yes, you need to be at a certain point where you have comfort, safety, security, all those things. But once you go beyond that, there have to be things outside of just the material and financial realm to give your life meaning and happiness. So I'm curious, how do you define living a meaningful life? And what advice do you have for somebody who might feel stuck or overwhelmed by the pressures they feel from their family or from their obligations or just society in general? Because, like you said, right, certain cultures have, well, your doctors or your lawyers or your
Right.
this. Where I live is also a super competitive area. I'm in Connecticut, but I'm in a suburb of New York City. And so people are
Mm.
just brought up here with an intensity. It's a very, very like well focused area, and so people have a tendency to feel like you always need more, more, more. So how can we break away from that, and how do you define what a meaningful life is?
I think first of all we need to find that out for ourselves, right? And we need to go internally because we're taking, all of us are looking at the outside, the external factors that make us happy. But really, if we don't go internally and start the questions, ask questions from our point of view, it's not going to work. And when I say internally, I mean that could include many things, right? You could, the deeper you want to go, it's up to you. But at the end, have we really stood in front of the mirror and asked whether the things that we're chasing are really what we want? Maybe they're not. Maybe we're conditioned. I don't say maybe. I think it's probably we're being conditioned by our upbringing, environment. So, for my father, for example, was brought up. His father was a farmer, so a farmer and a sort of Muslim preacher. So he came from a very very poor background. So his goal and his lifelong ambition and dream was to make money, to have security, to have homes, and what he did was an incredible story. I could never match that. For me to do what he did, I had to become a billionaire. And that's the jump that he made. So, but that was his journey, and I at the end, when after much reflection, I felt that I was living his kind of life. I was sort of ticking the boxes he wanted to tick. So the questions come back to you. How do you define what makes you happy? How you're fulfilled? It's really very, very personal. It's up to you. For me, I found that. I wanted more mindfulness in my life. I wanted more presence. I wanted to become more vulnerable and to express myself. And writing was a big, big way forward for me to be able to do that. And if I tell that to people who want to make money, they sort of laugh in my face, and it's not the things that they want. But it's what makes my heart sing. It's what makes me really content at the end of the day. Today I have the luxury of not, I don't have to go to work from 9 to 7. I took a day off and I spent the whole morning writing and preparing. And I can't put the way it makes me feel happy and content just to spend a few hours journaling, writing, preparing an essay. So it's all, I think, deeply rooted to the person. It's quite subjective, and I think we need to do the asking. We need to do the questioning.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There's an expression or a common saying in the United States, anyways. They talk about what the conversation is around the dinner table, right? And
Mm.
so it's basically the lessons you learn from your parents. So, like you said, if you see that your mother and your father are this, then you want to do that. We have friends who, um, I can see from the outside the way that their kids think as they've grown up and they're getting out of college, they're sort of following in the same because their sphere of influence and their understanding of the world, they're sort of still seeing through their parents' eyes. They haven't sort
Yeah.
of branched out. And so and look, there might be alignment, right? Maybe they want the same thing their parents, but I don't know if they even question it, to your point, right? I don't know. I think they might just be in that sort of habit of this is what I'm doing, and so that's how it is set up. And then I think at some point in our lives, and sometimes it is from a situation that rocks our world in a sense, a health issue or a life and death issue or a financial issue that's catastrophic that makes us reevaluate
Right.
and say, maybe the things that I'm chasing aren't really the most important. The other expression that they always say to people when they're trying to teach them to follow their dreams and figure out what their passions are is nobody ever said on their deathbed, I wish I spent more days at the office. you know, there's always
Absolutely.
other things that they wish that they did. So many of us are afraid of change though. So how can somebody begin to embrace the change in their life if they're nervous to even look and think about what it is that they want? Are there steps that they can take toward getting that self-discovery?
I mean, as you said, we are creatures of comfort, and it's very hard for us to change, to transform. And I think it's what we need to do is build these little habits or rituals in our lives. And I know everybody's sort of fed up if you heard the word habit, between atomic habits and tiny habits and daily things. Nobody wants to listen. There has to be a quick fix. There isn't a quick fix. That's the sad truth, you know. And for me, I build these small rituals every morning whereby I'll sit for an hour before I go to work, where I'd read, I'd meditate, I'd journal. And so these became the bedrock of my own transformation. Because I was sort of self-analyzing myself. I didn't have to go and see a therapist, not at the beginning anyway. I saw one later on. But but the journaling acted as if I was becoming more self-aware. Why was I behaving? Why wasn't I happy? I was asking myself, why wasn't I happy? Meanwhile, my friends and some of my family members were extremely happy by making money and spending. And honestly, for me, the more I read, especially some great books, literary books, some good self-help books, the more sort of it expanded my way of thinking. And that's the first step. The first step is to be aware of something, to actually think about it. But then there's a next step of awareness, which is actually getting into the right action or right behavior, you know, and that's even more work. So it is, I mean, if you really want to embrace change and transformation, I'll just say it's not an easy journey, but if you don't do it, it's going to happen to you. So it's as simple as that. Something's going to happen to you. So if you don't start it, you're going to lose at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. So I was actually going to ask you too, when you started this journey, because I like most habits, right? Things get easy, but was it difficult? Like, did you find your mind wanders or you have a hard time really sort of getting comfortable with really exploring that, or was it something that came easy to you? Because I'm curious to see if there was a progression for you, or if whether when you started because you were ready, it just was natural right from the start.
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. Some of them I felt ready, like I was so hungry to read books. I would read for an hour and a half every morning. And I'm sure if you tell somebody to start picking a book tomorrow, make it a habit, they're gonna find it much harder. For me, I was eager to read. I was hungry for the knowledge, hungry for the information. But let's take a habit of meditation, which I've read so much about. It's a great habit, and so for me to do that was very hard to really get into it. And I would go weeks sort of being very consistent, then I'll suddenly jump off the bandwagon and leave it out for months. But then what I did is, I think what really helps is these small habits. Like instead of expecting myself to meditate for 20 minutes a day, I'll do 5 minutes a day. I'll just continue doing that. Or I'll do some breath work instead. So it's just something sort of where my mind is still. That's the whole point. And when you understand, like I feel also when you understand the why of the habit, because we take on these habits as if this is the how of how we should do things, but without understanding why we're doing it. So let's take meditation. Everybody is jumping on meditation. We need to meditate. All the successful people are meditating, right? But the better question is why. For me, the only reason of meditation isn't we're not going to reach some kind of nirvana or heaven. I haven't felt anything. I don't know. People who have, when I listen to them, I really find the stories very strange. So I feel the point of meditation is sort of to still that monkey mind that we have in us, we all have this chattering voice that keeps on talking and putting self-doubt and self-loathing or judges us all the time. So the minute that we sort of we meditate or do some mindful practices is when we stop that chattering mind talking, right? So that's the why of meditation for me. So that really helps in making the habits easier to take on.
Yeah, and I think that's also, such an important point because we are conditioned to be going, going, going all the time. We feel like if we aren't productive in the traditional sense, we aren't getting any. And nowadays, especially because we're exposed to so much more information, we have so much more
Absolutely.
access, we're so much more connected. And so while there's benefits of that, there's also drawbacks because we have a lot less alone time. We have a lot less quiet time. Even for me growing up, um, there were no cell phones, right? So
Mm,
we had one telephone in the house. It had a cord on it, and if you wanted to make a call, you waited for your parents to get off the phone or whatever else. TV was only on like several hours a day, but we had six channels. It wasn't 200 channels, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There was no
absolutely.
internet. So again, for better and worse, right? It was harder to find information, harder to access, harder to connect, to people around the world. At the same time, you had a lot more time to yourself. My days as a child was I went outside, jumped on my bike, and rode around the neighborhood collecting
Mm,
kids, and we went to the ball fields and played ball. But I had a lot of alone time because I was riding my bike, I was outside, I was in nature, doing different things. So there's a lot of time to think. And we can go through our lives nowadays doing very little thinking if we really want to, because we're constantly bombarded with some sort of stimulus. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons that meditation too and sort of mindfulness have become so valuable and important to
true.
people. And they've recognized it because I think we have to be deliberate about it now in order to be able to do it. It won't be accidental anymore. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. What you're saying is
yeah.
spot on because even with all the work that I've done on myself, the presence, even last year, I found myself on because there was this whole war going on in the Middle East, and I was sort of personally involved. I have family there, so I wanted to keep up with information. So I re-downloaded the Twitter, and I found myself, or X as it's called now, I found myself spending maybe. I just want to check the news, and 5 minutes turns into 15, turns into 30 minutes. It's crazy. Then me of all people, I've trained myself, and I'm within months, I'm really addicted to it. So I suddenly made this. I removed the app completely, and if they can do this to somebody who's 55 years old, who's very aware, who reads regularly, who understands, what can they do with 14-year-olds to 21-year-olds, right? They can take your mind away. It's the biggest fight for your attention in history probably this time, and I can see with my own kids even and kids of friends, they can't last 2 minutes without either twitching or trying to find some kind of a stimulus. This instant gratification, it's terrible, and I think honestly we're gonna reach a place where we all need some kind of help or some kind of big time intervention.
Yeah, well, in Australia, they just passed that law, so kids won't be able to have social media apps anymore. And I think there's a lot of value in that because there is pressure. As parents, we didn't want to give our kids phones young, but you get to a certain age where everybody else has one, and then
Yeah,
you can't connect with your kid either. So it isn't so much keeping up with everybody, it's just that you don't want your kid to be an outcast either. So
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
want to make sure that they at least have the ability to be, in the same, so because the social element of being a kid's really important as well. So well, I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know if you saw the movie The Social Dilemma, but it's
I have,
basically
yeah.
about the
Yeah.
dangers. Okay, so you see, the founder of Instagram said, look, I founded this thing. I'm sitting here in my cupboard and I'm supposed to be doing other things and I'm scrolling my feed. I can't even help myself. Like he even recognized he couldn't help
Yeah.
himself from doing it. So it's a problem when people that have the awareness that are adults that have critical thinking abilities that are fully developed, that are smart people, struggle with it. It's no match for a kid who doesn't have those
Absolutely.
faculties developed yet. So, yeah, no, that makes total sense. So, so in terms of getting to know ourselves, the personal growth element, what role do you think vulnerability plays in it? Because I can tell you that it's scary, I think, sometimes to want to be open or vulnerable about things.
I mean, I think vulnerability for specifically for men, we're not used to sharing our feelings, and with our male friends, we don't usually talk. We do things together, like we would play a game or play sports, share some activities, but we don't really talk. We don't really share our feelings. It's monosyllable most of the times, right? One word or whatever. But the tragedy is that we are getting stuck in a place, and as we grow into midlife and so on, we find that we have less male friends around us. You've left the work, the sports that you used to do with others, you don't do anymore. So these vulnerabilities sort of makes friendships deeper. How can I just say this a bit more? But it's a very powerful way of being human. So we're not actually being seen as human with, or we're always supposed to be in our best behavior. We're always supposed to be at the top of the ladder, and we're always supposed to be never wrong. So if you continue doing that all your life, you're gonna be isolated on your own. That's one aspect at midlife. But as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and I found that to my own, I would run whenever I was doing everything. I was a one-man show running the company. It's great. You can be invulnerable. You can be tough. No, everybody out of fear. Everybody's responding. But the minute you want to build a team, a good team around you, vulnerability really helps because it's showing the other team members that you are quite human. They can be like you. They can try and they can fail. And if they fail, it's not the end of the world. It's just part of the process. And that's what vulnerability is so it's such a powerful tool for us to use and to embrace, because at the end of the day we're not perfect, right? And the more you try to be perfect, the worse your performance is going to be. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I like that perspective. I'll tell you a funny side story. So,
Mhm.
I wanted to start this podcast for a long time. I've been a 17-year entrepreneur. I had ideas about doing it. And what literally held me back in the beginning was the fact that I thought, if I'm going to make a podcast for entrepreneurs, I have to have all the answers, right? I got to be the guy that is always bestowing like what knowledge and wisdom you need. And then I just, I don't know what happened, but I just had a shift one day and I said, no, I don't. It's the opposite. The whole idea is share the journey, right? Share the ups, share the downs. That's what makes you human. That's what makes people say when somebody, even though we know intuitively no one is perfect, when someone is pretending to be perfect or appears to be perfect, they're actually less approachable and less relatable because we can't feel like we're like that.
Yeah.
So we say, well, geez, they're perfect. They're great at everything, but I couldn't do that. I'm not like that. And once I realized, I don't need to have the answers. I just need to have the discussion. I can bring people on. We can talk about stuff. I can share my experiences, good and bad. And it lets other entrepreneurs know. And this was my main reason I started it. You're not alone,
Mm,
right? It can feel isolating to be an entrepreneur.
absolutely.
It,
Yes.
it takes a lot of courage, right, to start a business. And so I wanted people to feel as though, look, there's other people out there that know what you're going through. We support you. We know like what it takes to do this. And so understand, keep going, follow your dreams and all that kind of good stuff. But at the same time, don't need to have all the answers. And so that was my own lesson in vulnerability. And it was
No,
hard for me. I struggled with that in the beginning. Um,
that's
so
so good. Yeah, so good and honest, because it needs courage to do that. It's not easy.
Yeah, and that was the thing. But I'll tell you, there's two things. Once I made the switch, not only did I feel liberated, but I also felt much more excited about the whole idea because I know now I can just approach this with passion and interest and energy. and I don't need, I can just be an open book, and I can learn and grow as we do this whole process. And I don't need to come into it with this idea that I have all this burden on my shoulders to try to show everybody everything. And so it's liberating. It feels great. It's exciting.
Yeah.
And so, 2 years ago when that happened, I said, you know what, I'm just going all in on this. I'm going to do this because I think there's a real need for it. I think people need to know that, you can do it, but, don't feel like you're the only one who's alone or you're the only one who's been through struggles. Every business owner goes through that kind of stuff. So,
That's and in my book I talk about how I mean I've done some corporate talks and I spoke at TEDx and how a lot of people who relate to me are these older business owners who come in who've seen time and they're like in their midlife and they come over to me at the end and tell me it's a relief for them to actually hear somebody who's gone through this and how courageous I am to be able to talk about them. And I look at them and I say, "Well, what's stopping you?" And they said, "No, they will never be able to talk about their problems in front of their friends, in front of their colleagues, in front of it's." But they absolutely understand the power of it and as you said, the word is liberating. And I'll share another story. When I was launching my book, The Midlife Shift, behind me, on the actual launch day, it was an online thing on Amazon. So I was getting some help from a marketing consultant, and he told me, Mo, you have to reach out to every single person that you know. You have to force them to buy the book, even though it's on under $1. You have to be salesy. You have to be whatever word you want to use, creepy, salesy. But you have to do that. And I was me. I can't do that. But I said, you know what? Then let me give it my best shot. And really, it was from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 in the evening. I texted, I called, I emailed all my friends, buy the book, give me a review on this day, and you know what? What I wasn't expecting was the response. Maybe 99% of the people I called or helped me. Not just only helped me, they wanted to help me. They felt, as you said the word, they are relatable. They felt that they could relate to this vulnerable move. Because I had shed my tough armor, I had become vulnerable. Everybody wanted a piece of that. They could relate to it. And they really helped me really launch my book in a good way. That was one part. But the big story, the big takeaway for me was when you're really speaking from the heart, everybody wants to talk to you. That's the honest truth.
yeah, that's really powerful, and what a great story, and it so illustrates the lesson perfectly.
Right.
So we all have periods of transition in our lives. Are there insights from your own experience for people that are going through life transitions for how to best manage that?
I mean, yes, of course, there is. We need to accept that whenever we're on a transformation, there's going to be plateaus, and we need to be comfortable with the plateaus. Everything I'm saying is not very is not very pleasant to hear, I guess, to your listeners, right? Everybody wants it, probably something easier, but you see, as you rise, it's going to be a plateau. You're going to be comfortable. You need to rest on that plateau or be comfortable with it, so that because that's when all the work is going to be done again, so that you go and rise again and towards the goal or the transformation that you're seeking. So it's a long journey, but if you do accept that there are mountains and valleys, you'll begin to enjoy it. It's not going to all be stars and applause and smiles and laughs. There's a mix of everything. And I guess that's life. Life is messy. Life is not straightforward. Life is not easy. But I'm not saying it's hard as well, because the minute you lower expectations, I think that's key, and you accept that there is plateaus, you'll start enjoying it much more.
Yeah, I think that that's super important. One of the things that I've tried to consciously do over the last several years, because again, raising a family, trying to climb the success ladder and your own business, and I always felt like I was going, 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 and there were a lot of times where I wasn't present, right? So I'm doing something, I'm at a family function, but my mind is a million miles away.
Mm,
I'm worried about all the things I got to do in my business, and one of the things that I've tried to do, even in times where maybe things aren't exactly the way I want them to be, or I'm disappointed with the results I got on something, is try to enjoy the journey, try to embrace it and recognize that, you know, first of all, a lot of times when we have breakthroughs, they come from a problem or a challenge that we're faced with in the first place. That's what leads us to that breakthrough anyway. But
True.
the other side of it is it's important to recognize and appreciate the opportunity that we have in front of us each and every day, because if we aren't enjoying the moment we're living in, this is the only moment we've got. Right? Tomorrow, you don't know what tomorrow brings. Yesterday is just a memory. So if we're living in the past or we're living in the future, we're missing out on the opportunity to enjoy and appreciate the things that are good about our lives every day. And so, for me, I've just tried to slow down, recognize, be present in the moment, and be appreciative. Have gratitude for the things that are good, because for whatever problems I've got, there are other people with 10 times more, right?
Right.
And so I think it's just important to try to give ourselves that perspective sometimes, even though it can be challenging when things aren't going the way that we want. But
Right.
um,
And also
is
with
there
the,
a oh,
yeah. Go ahead.
go for it.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to ask if there's a big lesson or takeaway from your journey of self-discovery and transformation. Is there one sort of overarching or general idea that you want to share, or you could share with people about that?
I think as I said a little, I sort of spoke about a bit before. It's that it's the mindful, the being present is key, and how you find that. The problem is you need to shut off all the noise so that you can be able to listen to the music that comes to you, and that's the challenge we have, because we want to be present. Let's say you're in a family dinner or whatever, but you have issues going in and at work. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? And then it's all these numbers that are running in your head, and all that. So I really do think that we need to sort of, the biggest shift I found is that we need to shift from our survivalist mindset to one that is a more relaxed mindset. Relaxed doesn't mean you're not being ambitious or you're not going to run after your goal, but on the, it's much more powerful, because your reactions and your actions are going to be much more composed. So whenever you feel like you're anxious, you're desperate, you need something, I think you're coming from a survivalist mindset, which is not going to help you at the end of the day. Sure, you're going to put out a fire, and you need those. I'm not saying not. Sometimes in my business, I've had to put out fires. I've had to put on the cap of you know what, let's not take any prisoners. I'm a warrior this week. I need to do that. But in general, we need to be a bit more, I guess in business terms, strategic rather than operational, and sort of to map out the years that are coming out, sort of, and to be able to act and react from a point of a relaxed state of nervous system, that is a relaxed one, not one that is reactive.
Yeah, I
Right.
think I think that's powerful. It's interesting how the harder sometimes you focus and try to do something, the further it seems to get from you. You can't quite, when you relax and sort of let it happen,
Let it
then
go. Yeah.
things seem it seems counterintuitive, but it is so true. I've seen that a lot. And it's actually true across life in a variety of things. I mean, I've seen the same thing with regard to dating and finding a mate, right? I
Mm.
know people that they've just desperately wanted to be with somebody. And the harder that they've tried to date, the less success they have. The minute they stop looking for it, all of a sudden they meet somebody on the subway, or they meet somebody at the
Mm.
and they end up dating, and that's the person they end up with. So it is interesting how that works, but it does definitely seem to bear itself out. So what inspired you to write The Midlife Shift?
I mean, this book I've been writing for the past 7 years. I felt like my journey needed to be heard. I mean, and as an entrepreneur, as a man, I feel like our voices are not being heard enough, uh, because of the vulnerability, the invulnerability we talked about, and lack of opportunities we have now, as midlifers and so on. So I felt like my journey needed to be heard, and some of the things that I've gone through are quite different. It's not a normal sort of route I've gone through, and expressing them and just writing this whole book was the one of the biggest self discovery things that I've ever done, because the more you write, the more you actually analyze and reflect. You know.
Yeah, I love that. It gives you a different perspective. You know, living
Absolutely.
something, you have one perspective. When you then have to either teach it or share it, it changes your relationship with that whole experience, which is really powerful as well. So,
Sure.
all right. So, where can people find your products, find your services, connect with you?
My website is www.mo-issa.com dash and issa.com. I'm on Instagram, mo.issa, LinkedIn, Mo Akil Issa. So the usual places. And also I write a weekly Substack page. And if you type in Substack and Midlife Bliss, that's what I've called it, you'll hear it there. You'll see it there, sorry.
Perfect. Thanks for that. All right. I have one last question I have to ask because I think it's important. I always want to know what everyone's going to say. And that's what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
I think getting in the right people, the right team around you, because you can never do anything alone, really. And I've suffered with that lesson for a long time, until I've sort of in the past 10 years I've finally found the right team that you can groom, you can help grow. So getting in the right people is key.
I couldn't agree more. One of my biggest regrets professionally is that I didn't spend enough time building connections. I had
Mm,
opportunities to, but I was so focused on doing. And so I always had that. And I guess that's sort of the blessing and the curse of the entrepreneur. We believe we can do everything.
all right.
At the same time, we can't. So it's an illusion. You got to have other people on the bus, and you got to have other people that you can trust, that are competent, that are, talented, and let them do what they do, and you do what you do best as well. So I love that advice. Um,
Thank you.
with that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again, Mo, so much for sharing all your insight, great tips with us. Visit mo-issa.com for his books, workshop, and blog. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And as always, remember, no matter what you want from your business life, don't compromise, optimize.